Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here in Orlando for the Air Force Association's annual Air Warfare Symposium, #1 winter gathering of the services leadership, industry executives, thought leaders, reporters, and more here in Florida. Our coverage is sponsored by L3 Technologies and Leonardo DRS, and we're honored to have with us Brigadier General Mike Schmidt, who is the Program Executive Officer, United States Air Force's Program Executive Officer for C3IN Networks, C3IN. Sir, I guess, sir, yes. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Vago. It's great seeing you again. Really appreciate it and look forward to the opportunity to have a chat.
Absolutely. We had a great conversation at Airspace and Cyber, the big do that is always around the Air Force's birthday in September. Let's start with the common computing, or common computing environment. Obviously, the Air Force is leading the services to sort of getting all of that data up in the cloud. You know, you're at the nexus of everything that's sort of really most interesting and revolutionary, both in society but also in military operations, from the cyber side of things to the network side of things to the just regular infrastructure that everybody is using. Talk to us about how that migration is going. You know, I mean, there was a lot of debate associated with that. I still get emails from people saying, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever, and you know, Amazon and the society's going to end when we do this. Talk to us about why this is the right thing, but most importantly, how that migration is going to get away from these ground-based legacy distributed architectures we have to something that is actually going to be a lot more secure at the end of the day.
Yeah, thanks, Vago. Appreciate it. So yeah, I'm really excited about where we're going with this. As you mentioned, I think we're leading the pack in terms of the movement of our data to the cloud. It really is a more secure environment than where we're at today. Knowing where our data is and knowing the security boundary around our data is much better than having pockets of data all over the place where we might think it's secure, but it's a kind of a different standard at every different place. So we are taking all of our Air Force applications, or as many as possible, and moving them from wherever they are into the cloud, whether that be AWS, Amazon Web Service, or Microsoft Azure, or some other cloud in the future. But that's kind of where we're at today. We've moved many applications already, and trying to hit 100 this year if possible. Kind of funding, maybe funding limited, but we're trying to get to 100 this year. But the real benefit of that is now we actually know where our data is, and our data is in the same place. I think the next big step is learning how to, working with our Chief Data Officer, Ms. Eileen Vidrine and her office, to properly tag the data that's in our cloud or elsewhere in the Air Force, because you have to tag it to know where it is and to use it. And then when you're tagging it, make sure that the data that you've tagged is from an authoritative source. Data is just data unless you're sure of the source of that data. And then we can start to apply artificial intelligence and machine learning tools on that. We've already done some great projects with IBM Watson, for instance, on our engine programs, allowing us to identify areas where maybe during an engine overhaul we could do parallel maintenance to keep our engines in the field longer or take them down less time, increasing our aircraft availability, increasing our readiness. I'm an industrial engineer by trade, so I think a little bit in terms of you know, queuing theory and that stuff, kind of the study of lines. And you know, the really cool part about that is, you know, those industrial engineering techniques where you just take the data and say and try to figure out, well, if I applied more resources at this point, I could be more efficient, I could get more throughput, or maybe I have too many resources at this point and I could put it somewhere else. That's really, in my mind, what machine learning and artificial intelligence is taking data from disparate places, and I think we're doing some neat things in the Air Force, and when you put it together, it gives you the ability to make decisions that you didn't see before. I would mention another great program that the Air Force started, Ms. Deb Nagai and her team started to really look at condition-based maintenance for some of our aircraft, and really identifying, you know what, if we had put this part on the airplane because we suspected it would fail and it flew to Spain or wherever, and you had the part in the airplane, what a difference that makes versus having to wait a few days for that part to show up. So that kind of stuff is going on, and we're moving Deb Nagai's condition-based maintenance stuff into the common computing environment as well.
Let me ask you a little bit, you know, you mentioned security, that's one of the important things. there was a GAO study late last year, as I recall, that said something like 80% of the most sophisticated and important networks we have are actually protected by like the worst passwords you could imagine. Some of this is a culture. We were talking about some cultural things that people do. Even though the computer looks like your home computer, it doesn't mean that you do this, that, or the other thing. How is that cultural piece going? Of getting the whole enterprise to think very differently, to think very security minded, because this space is becoming much, much more contested in types of the capabilities, the intrusions, the persistence of the threats, whether you look at what the Chinese are doing or the Russians are doing or the North Koreans or even the Iranians or even terror groups are doing or criminal organizations. It's astonishing the sophistication of the capabilities. What are some of the things that have to happen from your standpoint that is on the human side of this equation and not just on the systems side to ensure that networks that are designed to be secure fail when the humans are not doing the things they need to do to keep them secure?
Yeah, so you covered a lot of ground there, Vago. But so on the big defense of our network side, I think General Skinner and the 24th Air Force, there's a lot of focus on that. But I would say a lot of what you talked about in the beginning is kind of cyber hygiene, and there's definitely a lot of focus in the Air Force right now on cyber hygiene. Don't stick thumb drives into your computer. That's just something that over and over we seem to have to repeat, and getting through basic cyber hygiene, change your passwords when they should be changed. While some laptops on your desk or at home might look like the same laptop that you use to load OFPs into F-16s, they're not, and they need to be treated completely differently. So certainly defense of our networks and the really hard defense, cyber defense things is very important. But from an Air Force standpoint, we got to get past the hygiene part first, and I think we're making a lot of progress there. The airmen today know a whole lot more about cyber hygiene than they did just a short time ago, and I really feel like we're moving in the right direction there.
We were just up in Montreal not very long ago at Thales's artificial intelligence site, and some of their experts were talking about the vital role of AI in cybersecurity in particular, but also that there are folks who don't fully understand what artificial intelligence is. And there are a lot of friends of mine in the military community even, but also in the civilian world who are like, look, what does really AI mean, or 5G, or blockchain? As the person who kind of touches and sees all of this, what's the right way for folks to think about all of these technologies that are fast moving? Obviously with 5G, we know what the security concerns are with China associated with it, but what's the right way? And what do you tell senior leaders, when they ask, because they're much more schooled and versed in their traditional warfare areas, whereas this is a warfare domain in its own right?
So I won't talk about 5G because that really is the future, and the high speed rates and high speeds of data, the ability to connect a lot of users, and the question will be, how do we take advantage of 5G as it comes on while maintaining the security posture, and those are all things that we're going to work through as technology grows. I think back to your artificial intelligence, what is it exactly, and what some people are creating big centers for artificial intelligence, and that's a little overwhelming for me because when I think of artificial intelligence, I think of it as I want to take disparate data and I want to bring it together, and I want to make decisions with that data that I couldn't make before because I have that data together. I call that data weaponization. Dr. Roper calls that data weaponization. That's really what it is. We are taking data and bringing it together and making ourselves a much better fighting force because we were able to figure out how to bring that data together, put some algorithms on top or decision-making tools on top, and be better than we were before, and be quicker to the fight than we were before. And to me, that's artificial intelligence in my little nutshell, if you will.
And what about blockchain in terms of how that actually may increase your encryption capability? Because you find in so many of these conversations that comes up as, hey, this is the next level. Actually, it is a little bit like artificial intelligence. It is whatever it is to the beholder. But do you see a role in that in terms of any of the infrastructures that the service has?
So certainly we spend a lot of time ensuring that the data that comes in, I talked about the authoritative source. How am I sure that I'm getting the data from a secure environment? Your definition of secure could be many different things. How valuable is this data for you that you want to make sure this is pristine data versus some data, I'm not sure we want to protect so much. There's a lot we can learn, from social media in terms of decision-making tools for the Air Force or for any business and that kind of thing. And in that case, we don't worry so much about the authoritative source, but then you get back to maybe we do have to worry about the authoritative source, because if someone's playing around with that, it could change your decision-making process. So those are hard questions, but I think we only have so many resources, and we need to decide what data do we really need to make sure we need to protect, and what data do we say that, the commercial industry does an awfully good job of protecting data. We trust our banks, and that's probably good enough for the Air Force. In fact, I discussed last fall a little bit about enterprise IT as a service, and we're getting into this risk reduction phase, and we have AT&T and Microsoft on contract right now to do a number of risk reduction bases, and we're super excited about it. But there certainly are some that are questioning and saying, hey, are we going to trust to go to a new network for the United States Air Force? And definitely one of the questions, one of the answers from my perspective is, well, we trust those companies in our homes and our computers that we do our banking on, and we trust them with our banks. What part of the Air Force's mission are we willing to trust them, and which parts are we not? And those are decisions that I think will come to light here as we work through this risk reduction phase of enterprise IT as a service.
And one last question, right? When it comes to security, it's funny, we were talking about the nuclear deterrent, and that actually it's remarkably secure and impervious to hacking because A, it's in a language nobody understands. No, I'm joking. But it's cassettes, and it's a very insulated, not connected to the outside world system. As you look to update new systems like that, how, especially for these ultra mission critical systems, what are the challenges, the opportunities, and the right way to do that, right? Because some of these systems, there's no way in, but by definition, when you update them, there will be ways in. How do you do that, where you're going from something ultra secure and make sure you still have that security, but obviously in a modernized fashion?
That's a tough question, Vago. So you're right. The thing that's maybe still on a DOS-based system, but it doesn't touch the internet, it doesn't touch anything, that seems like it's pretty secure, although there may be an insider threat that you might have to worry about in that case or something like that. And then when you're trying to go to the next version of that, when you're trying to get connected to the net, when you're trying to get better at taking advantage of all the data out there, but now you've introduced additional security risk to your platform. There's no one right answer, and we spent a lot of time looking through our cyber awareness, our cyber walking through the steps of where are the risks, and are these risks worth taking for the gain that we're getting out of maybe a better capability. But you're right, in some cases, maybe just having the old school tape that's in someone's drawer, that has some level of risk and some level of security, and those are hard questions that we ask ourselves every day.
General, thanks very much. It's an absolute pleasure always talking to you. You're really at the most nexus of the most interesting stuff that's going on, and sadly 99% of it you really can't talk about.
Thanks, Vago. I really enjoy it. I'm really again excited about where we're going in IT in the Air Force. It's a place we haven't been in the Air Force, and I really should mention that a lot of this is about the user experience for our airmen. Ultimately, our airmen watching a donut spin around on their computer is work that they're not getting done. It's not fair to our airmen that they have to deal with that on any regular basis, and it's our job to change that for them. And so not to separate, but including the security side of things, making the user experience right for our airmen is our mission. And honestly, I hear General Holmes talk about that all the time, and I'm very proud that he's doing that, and it's helping us a lot.
And actually, it's good that you mentioned the enterprise IT and the user experience. Last year when we interviewed, we did discuss it, but contractors hadn't been chosen. So bring us up to speed quickly on where we stand right now, because you guys have selected contractors.
Right. So this is really in three phases. There's the network as a service phase, and then there's the compute and store phase, and then enterprise as a service, compute and store, and end user services phase. And so we selected the contractors to do the initial network as a service phase, so that's AT&T and Microsoft, and they're going to do that at a maximum of or up to 20 bases to prove the viability and then the scalability of network as a service, and we're going to do the same thing for compute and store and the same thing for end user services, although we probably don't need to go to multiple contractors on end user services, although we may. But anyways, that is how we're going to prove the viability and the scalability of basically going to the best commercial contractors in the world, and I'm not saying it's just AT&T and Microsoft, those are just the ones that were selected for this, and then we'll get to a FAR type competitive environment in the FAR compliant competitive environment in the future, but this is again just for the risk reduction piece of this.
And how long before it would go service-wide, right? I mean, in your plan, because I know it's a pretty aggressive plan.
It is a pretty aggressive plan, but a lot of that depends on how this goes. So we'll start by next summer. I think we'll start to know how we're doing in terms of the viability, and then over the next few years, let's say 3 or so years, the scalability, and then certainly it will be resource dependent, or our ability to get after the entire United States Air Force, about 200 bases worldwide eventually. But over the next few years, I hate to set any specific dates because we're not going to make decisions moving forward until we feel like the metrics and the data supports the decisions that we make.
Brigadier General Mike Schmidt, who is the Program Executive Officer for, in the United States Air Force for Command, Control, Communications, Information, and Networks. Sir, thanks very much. It's a pleasure always.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Vago. Thanks.